My name is Avery Collins. I'm 22, and I used to believe embarrassment was just the price of living under someone else's roof. That belief shattered on my dad's 60th birthday in our own backyard, with 35 people watching and smiling like they were waiting for a punchline. I had been up since 5 that morning, following a long list of chores I didn't write, but somehow always owned. Setting up chairs, wiping tables, and trying to make everything look perfect so he wouldn't find a reason to explode. I'd saved for months for a small gift, the kind you buy when you're trying to say I love you without having enough money to prove it. When it was time for presents, I stepped forward and placed it in his hands, hoping for one normal moment. Just one. He didn't smile. He didn't even look at me the way a father looks at his kid. He held my gift up between two fingers like it was dirty, and his voice cut through the yard loud enough to silence every conversation. He called it worthless. He called it junk. And before my brain could catch up, his palm cracked across my face so hard my vision flashed white. I heard someone gasp. Then I heard something worse. A little burst of laughter that tried to pretend it was all fine. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my sister's phone pointed straight at me, capturing everything for her followers, like my humiliation was content. My cheek burned, my throat tightened, and I realized this wasn't about a gift. It was about reminding me who I was in that house. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just turned and walked out, because staying would have meant letting them watch me break. That night, I ran away with a backpack and a shaking breath, telling myself I'd rather sleep anywhere than go back. I thought the worst part was over. I was wrong. A few hours later, a black SUV rolled up beside me. A man grabbed my arm, and I was shoved into the back seat so fast I honestly believed I was being kidnapped. Then the man sitting in the dark looked straight into my eyes and said 5 words that made my whole life tilt. I'm your biological father. Before I tell you what happened next, hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, and tell me where you're watching from so I know I'm not alone out here. For a few seconds after he said those words, I couldn't even process what they meant. My first instinct was pure panic. My hand went straight for the door handle, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. The door didn't open. The man in the driver's seat noticed immediately and pressed a button on the console. "It's unlocked," he said calmly. "You're not trapped." The car slowed, pulling to the side of the road under a dim streetlight. My fingers hovered on the handle, but I didn't move. I was breathing too fast, my mind trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes. The slap, the backyard full of people, running down the dark sidewalk with tears blurring the streetlights. And now, this stranger claiming something impossible. The man sitting across from me leaned forward slightly, just enough for the faint light from the dashboard to reveal his face. He looked nervous, like someone about to step onto thin ice. "My name is Caleb Whitman," he said quietly, "and I've been trying to find you for 19 years. I stared at him, searching his face for something familiar, something that would prove he wasn't insane. I didn't see it right away. All I saw was a tired man in his 50s with worry lines carved deep around his eyes. Then he reached slowly into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a photograph. "Before you decide I'm crazy," he said, holding it out carefully, "please look at this." I hesitated, but curiosity beat fear. I took the photo. It was old, slightly faded at the edges. A young woman stood in the center, smiling at the camera, her hair blowing across her face in the wind. Next to her was a tall man with his arm around her shoulders. Between them, in the woman's arms, was a baby wrapped in a soft blanket. My stomach tightened before my brain even understood why. The baby had the same dark hair I'd seen in every mirror my entire life. The same crooked little eyebrow. I slowly looked back up at him. "That's my wife," he said gently, "and that baby is you." My mouth went dry. "That's not possible," I whispered. For 22 years, I had lived with one version of my life. I knew who my parents were. I knew where I came from. Even if they treated me like a burden, they were still my family, weren't they? Caleb didn't argue. He simply nodded once, like he expected the reaction. Sitting beside him in the back seat was a woman in a dark blazer who had been silent until now. She offered a small professional smile. "My name is Erin Caldwell," she said. "I'm an attorney. I represent Mr. Whitman." That single sentence made my chest tighten even more. Lawyers didn't show up in the middle of the night unless something serious was happening. Caleb glanced toward the driver, then back at me. "We didn't mean to scare you," he said. "You were standing too close to the road and a car nearly clipped you. My driver pulled you in because he thought you might get hit." I remembered the blur of headlights rushing past just before the SUV stopped. Maybe that part was true. Maybe I hadn't been kidnapped at all. But that still left the bigger question hanging in the air between us. "Why now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "If you're really who you say you are, where have you been my whole life?" Caleb looked down at his hands for a moment before answering. "In a hospital bed for months," he said quietly. "And after that, fighting paperwork that said you were no longer my daughter." The words didn't make sense. Not yet. My brain kept snagging on that photograph. On the baby that looked exactly like me. Erin leaned forward slightly and placed a thin manila folder on the seat between us. "We've been investigating this for over a year," she said. "It started when Mr. Whitman found evidence that the documents transferring custody after your mother's accident may not have been legitimate." Accident. The word landed heavy in my stomach. I had been told my biological mother died when I was a baby. It was always described as something tragic but distant, like a story that belonged to someone else's life. Now it suddenly felt very close. Too close. I looked from the folder to Caleb again. "Why would anyone fake something like that?" I asked slowly. He didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered toward my backpack sitting on the floor near my feet. "That," he said quietly, "is what we're hoping you might help us understand." I followed his gaze and realized the zipper of my bag had partly opened when I was pulled into the car. The corner of an old, crumpled envelope was sticking out, the same envelope I had grabbed earlier that evening while cleaning out the garage. At the time, I didn't even know why I kept it. Something about it just felt wrong. Now, sitting in the back of that SUV with a stranger claiming to be my father, I had the strange feeling that the answer to everything might already be in my hands. My fingers went numb as I pulled the envelope out of my backpack. It was creased like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times, the kind of paper that had lived too long in a drawer where secrets go to die. I hadn't even meant to take it. Earlier that evening, before the party started, I'd been forced into the garage to clear space because my dad wanted to make room for something better. That's what he called it when he bought himself things he didn't need. I was dragging old boxes toward the trash when I saw the envelope wedged behind a paint can. No return address. Just a printed label with my wrong name and the house address. Something about seeing my name on something I'd never been allowed to touch made my stomach twist, so I slipped it into my bag before anyone could notice. Now I laid it on my lap in the back seat of the SUV like it was a live wire. Caleb watched me carefully, not rushing, not demanding. Erin's expression changed in the smallest way, like she recognized the shape of the paper before I even opened it. "Go ahead," she said softly. "If it's what I think it is, it matters." I swallowed and tore the edge. Inside were several sheets, some older than others, all printed in that official government font that makes your chest tighten before you've even read a word. The first page had numbers in bold and a header that made my brain stall. Adoption assistance, federal and state benefits. Then another page with a different header. Tax credit documentation, claim dependents, filing years, amounts. I stared at the totals and felt my throat go dry. I didn't understand every line, but I understood enough. There were yearly entries, one after another, stretching back nearly 2 decades, and each year had money attached to it. Thousands, some years more than others. I looked up, my voice shaking with disbelief. "What is this?" Erin didn't hesitate. "It's a trail," she said. "A financial trail." Caleb's jaw tightened like he was fighting anger that had been sitting in his body for years. Erin pointed to a section near the bottom. "This indicates your adoptive household received subsidy payments for your care," she explained, keeping her tone calm, almost clinical. "And these forms suggest they also claimed significant tax credits and dependent benefits. If these filings were fraudulent, it's not just a family issue, it becomes a legal issue." Legal issue. The words sounded too clean for what I was feeling. My hand started to shake, not from cold now, but from the sick realization spreading through my chest. "They got paid? For me?" I asked. The question came out small, like a child asking something obvious. Caleb nodded slowly. "If these documents are accurate," he said, "then yes. They benefited financially from having you in that house." My stomach flipped. I thought about the way I had been treated like hired help. The way I wasn't allowed to get my license because you don't need to go anywhere. The way I was told to buy my own school supplies from tip money I hid in my shoe, because it was the only thing I had that felt like mine. I remembered birthdays where I got a card with no cash inside while my sister unwrapped expensive electronics. I remembered begging for a dentist appointment when a tooth hurt so badly I couldn't sleep, and being told I was being dramatic. All those years I thought it was because I wasn't good enough. Because I was the difficult one. Because I was, somehow, wrong. But these papers were telling a different story. A colder story. A story where my pain wasn't accidental. It was profitable. Erin took one sheet and tapped a line with her fingernail. "This is especially important," she said. "This kind of paperwork usually doesn't just appear. Someone had to apply. Someone had to recertify. Someone had to keep you listed year after year." Caleb leaned in closer, his voice low. "Avery," he said, "there's another reason we came tonight. We didn't just find these forms." He paused like he hated the next part. "We found evidence that the signature on the document that stripped me of my parental rights was not mine." My breath caught. "What do you mean it wasn't yours?" Erin opened the manila folder she'd placed on the seat and slid out a photocopy of a legal form. At the bottom was a signature line with a name printed neatly beneath it. Caleb Whitman. It looked real at first glance, but then Erin pulled out a second page. A side-by-side comparison from a forensic handwriting analyst. The differences were circled in red. Slant, pressure, letter formation. Patterns that didn't match. "This is a preliminary analysis," Erin said, "but it strongly suggests forgery." Caleb's eyes were glassy now, but his voice stayed steady. "After your mother died," he said quietly, "I was injured badly. I was in and out of surgery. I couldn't even stand on my own, and during that time, people I trusted handled paperwork, people from our church, people who offered help." He swallowed hard. "Somewhere in that chaos, someone signed my name to a document that said I gave you up." My skin prickled. The pieces were clicking together in my head in a way that made me feel nauseous. The church connection. The way my adoptive parents always acted like pillars of the community. The way everyone treated them like saints for taking in a child. The way my dad loved being called a hero. "So you're saying," I whispered, "they didn't just adopt me?" Erin met my eyes. "We believe they acquired custody through fraud," she said. "And if they did, the financial benefits they collected could be considered part of that fraud." I looked back down at the envelope in my lap. My wrong name printed on the label. My life reduced to numbers and forms. And suddenly, the slap at the party didn't feel like a random outburst anymore. It felt like the same pattern. Control, humiliation, keeping me small so I wouldn't ask questions, so I wouldn't look behind paint cans in the garage and find the truth. My voice came out sharper than I expected. "Why keep the papers?" I asked. "If they were doing something illegal, why wouldn't they destroy this?" Erin's lips pressed together. "People who think they're untouchable keep trophies," she said, "and people who build their image on being good sometimes believe paperwork is protection. They don't think the person they're exploiting will ever see it." Caleb watched me, his face full of something that looked like sorrow and hope at the same time. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said. "You can walk away. You can tell us to leave you alone. I won't force myself into your life." I stared at him for a long moment. The idea of having a choice felt unfamiliar, almost frightening. In my adoptive home, choices were punishments disguised as options. Do this, or else. Come back, or else. Smile, or else. But here, sitting in the quiet hum of the SUV, I realized something else. If Caleb was telling the truth, then the people who raised me weren't just cruel, they were criminals. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about how to survive them. I was thinking about how to expose them. We didn't drive to a police station that night. Erin said something that surprised me at first. "We can report it," she explained, "but if you're not safe, none of the rest matters. Tonight is about getting you somewhere secure, then confirming the truth in a way no one can twist." The way she said twist told me she'd dealt with people like my adoptive parents before, people who could smile in public and destroy you in private. Caleb didn't argue, and neither did I. By the time we reached downtown Denver, my body was running on exhaustion and adrenaline. The city lights looked unreal through the window, like a different world I wasn't sure I was allowed to enter. The SUV pulled into a well-lit hotel entrance with cameras over the doors. A uniformed security guard nodded at the driver like they were expected. Erin walked in first, scanned the lobby, then motioned for me to follow. I noticed little things that made my chest loosen by a fraction. The front desk didn't know my adoptive father. No one here looked at me like I owed them anything. No one barked orders. No one told me to stand up straighter or stop making a scene. Erin checked us in under her name, then handed me a keycard. "You're on the same floor as us," she said. "If you need anything, you knock. If you hear anything you don't like, you lock the door and call me." It sounded like basic safety, but to me it felt like someone finally taking my fears seriously. The room was quiet. Too quiet at first. My whole life had been filled with the sound of someone else's footsteps coming to find me. Here, the only noise was the soft hum of the heater and the distant traffic outside. The curtains were open when I walked in, and I froze. A wide window filled one wall, showing the dark outline of the Rockies in the distance, under a pale strip of moonlight. I didn't know why that hit me so hard. Maybe because in the basement back home, there was no window. Just concrete and a small vent that smelled like laundry detergent and dust. I dropped my backpack on the floor and stood there like I didn't know what to do with freedom. Caleb stayed near the door, giving me space. He didn't rush toward me like he was trying to claim me. He didn't call me sweetheart or try to hug me. He simply looked around the room like he was making sure it was real, then quietly set a photo album on the table. "These are yours if you want them," he said. "If you don't, I'll put them away." I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress soft enough that my body sank into it. It felt wrong, like I didn't deserve something that comfortable. My cheek still throbbed from the slap, and when I touched it lightly I felt the heat there, the lingering proof of what happened. Proof. That word kept repeating in my head. The slap had been proof. The envelope had been proof. But the biggest proof was still missing, the one thing that would make everyone stop calling me dramatic. "I want a DNA test," I said suddenly. My voice was steadier than I felt. As soon as possible. Tomorrow morning. Erin nodded without hesitation. Already scheduled, she said. There's a LabCorp collection site a few blocks away. They open early. Chain of custody. Certified results. The kind that holds up. Caleb's eyes flickered with relief, but he didn't celebrate. He simply nodded like he respected the decision more than he needed the comfort. Whatever you need, he said. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my sister's phone pointed at my face. I heard the laughter. I felt the sting on my cheek. Then I remembered the photo of the baby and the woman smiling into the wind, and a different kind of pain rose in my chest. Grief for a mother I never got to know, and anger at the people who stole the chance. When morning finally came, the sky was a cold gray. Erin met me in the lobby with coffee and a small paper bag of breakfast I wasn't sure I could swallow. Caleb walked beside me without touching me, like he was afraid one wrong move would send me running. At the lab, the fluorescent lights were harsh, the air smelled like sanitizer, and the waiting room was full of people staring at their phones. To them, it was a routine appointment. To me, it was a verdict. The technician checked my ID, and my stomach dropped. I didn't have one. No driver's license. No state ID. My adoptive parents had always handled that. Erin stepped in smoothly, presenting paperwork and explaining the situation in careful legal language. The technician nodded, made a few calls, and accepted alternative verification. A few minutes later, I was sitting in a small room with a swab being rubbed along the inside of my cheek. Simple. Quick. Almost insulting that something so small could decide something so huge. Caleb did his swab too, hands steady, eyes fixed on a point on the wall like he couldn't bear to watch. Erin sealed everything in tamper-proof packaging and signed forms while the technician watched. "This is clean," Erin told me as we walked out. "No one can claim it was faked." Back at the hotel, the waiting was its own kind of torture. Erin said the expedited results could come within a day. A day felt like a lifetime. I tried to eat, but my stomach refused. I kept thinking about going back for my things, and then remembering that my things were not worth walking into that house alone. Caleb didn't push conversation. He just sat in the chair by the window with the album closed in his lap, like he was holding something fragile. At some point, I finally asked the question that had been burning behind everything else. "If you've been looking for me," I said, "why didn't you find me sooner?" Caleb exhaled slowly. "Because every time I got close," he said, "the trail went cold. Different addresses, different school records, and people who smiled at me and told me they'd help, then never returned my calls." He looked at me then, and the emotion in his eyes made my throat tighten. But I never stopped. That afternoon, Erin's phone buzzed. She stepped into the hallway to answer, then came back into the room with a piece of paper in her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't soften it. She simply handed it to me like she was giving me back my own name. My eyes scanned the bold numbers at the bottom. Probability of paternity: 99.999%. The room went silent. My hands started shaking so badly the paper rattled. I looked up at Caleb, and for the first time I saw it clearly. Not just the eyes, the shape of his jaw, the way his brow moved when he was trying not to cry. My voice came out as a whisper. "It's you." Caleb didn't rush to hug me. He didn't make speeches. He just nodded once, like the truth was both the best and worst thing he'd ever been given. "It's me," he said. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For 19 years, I had been treated like a burden that someone reluctantly carried. Now I understood the real story. I hadn't been unwanted. I had been taken. Erin didn't let the shock sit for long. Not because she was cold, but because she understood something I was only beginning to learn. Truth without protection can still leave you vulnerable. The moment the DNA confirmed Caleb was my biological father, she shifted into strategy mode. The first thing she asked for wasn't a dramatic statement, just a timeline. When the party started, when the slap happened, when I left the house, when the SUV stopped. She wrote everything down carefully and then looked up at me. "We're going to build this the right way," she said. "Clean, documented, impossible to dismiss." That phrase stuck with me. My entire life had been people dismissing me. Too sensitive, too dramatic, misunderstanding things. Erin wasn't interested in opinions. She wanted proof. Within hours, the hotel room turned into a quiet planning space. Papers from the envelope were spread across the desk, while Erin made a series of calm, precise calls. She requested certified records, contacted a forensic handwriting analyst, and reached out to a tax specialist who could explain those financial documents in a way a judge would take seriously. Caleb stayed nearby, watching silently, the way someone does when they're afraid one wrong move could make everything disappear. At one point, Erin noticed me touching my cheek where the slap had landed. She asked if she could photograph the mark for documentation. I nodded. For the first time, I didn't want that moment to fade. I wanted it recorded. Erin took the photos in clear light and asked me to repeat exactly what Derek said before and after he hit me. She wrote down every word. Then she asked something that made her pause. "Was anyone recording besides your sister?" I told her the slap happened during a TikTok live stream. Erin's expression sharpened instantly. "Live means witnesses," she said. "Live means timestamps." Within minutes, she drafted a request to preserve the video and had me search online for clips that had already been reposted. We found several. I started reading the comments and felt my stomach twist, but Erin gently stopped me. "Let me handle that part," she said. Later that evening, she asked about my personal documents: birth certificate, social security card, ID. I didn't have any of them. My adoptive parents always claimed they kept them safe. Erin nodded like she expected that answer. "Then we'll request them formally," she said. "If they refuse, that becomes evidence too." Not long after, my phone lit up with a message from Derek. He didn't use my real name. "Where are you, Maddie? You embarrassed me. Come home now." I stared at the screen as the next message arrived. "If you don't come back, don't call this family yours." Erin held out her hand and I gave her the phone. She took screenshots while Derek kept texting. The tone flipped from anger to fake patience. "I forgive you. Come home and we'll talk." When I didn't respond, the threats returned. "You have nothing without me. I can make this very hard for you." Erin saved every message calmly. "This shows control and motive," she said quietly. Then another text appeared from Janine telling me I was confused and needed to stop talking to strangers. She even attached an old childhood photo of me smiling at their kitchen table, like proof they had been loving parents. Erin stored that too. "They're building their version of the story," she said. "We're building the truth." The next afternoon, a letter arrived at the hotel addressed to me. Derek's handwriting was neat and careful, the tone almost polite. He said he loved me. He said I was making a mistake. He claimed Caleb was manipulating me. And at the very end, he slipped in a quiet warning. "If you keep this up, I'll tell everyone why you really ran away." Erin placed the letter in a plastic sleeve like evidence from a crime scene. "He's trying to scare you into silence," she said. "Because he knows if you speak, everything unravels." By evening, Caleb returned with information from a private investigator. Public records, financial links, and a past connection between Derek and a social worker involved in adoptions years ago. The more pieces we gathered, the clearer the pattern became. I looked at the growing stack of documents on the desk and felt something new rise in my chest. Not fear. Power. Erin asked me one final time if I was sure. "Once we file," she said, "this becomes public." I thought about the slap, the laughter, and Derek's threats arriving faster than any apology. Then I looked at her and answered without hesitation. I'm not going back. I want this in court. The morning of court didn't feel like a movie. It felt like standing on the edge of something cold and permanent. Erin met me in the lobby with a slim binder tucked under her arm and the kind of calm you only get from being prepared. Caleb stood on my other side, hands in his coat pockets, not touching me, just there. When we walked into the Denver courthouse, the air changed. Everything echoed. Every step sounded louder than it should, like the building itself wanted you to know it was serious. Across the hallway, Derek Langford was already there in a crisp suit, smiling too widely, shaking hands with people like he was at a fundraiser instead of a hearing about my life. My stomach turned, but Erin leaned in and whispered, "Don't look at him. Look at me. Today is not about his performance. It's about facts." In the courtroom, Derek's smile stayed glued to his face until he saw the binder Erin placed on the table. Then it twitched. The judge entered, and Erin started with the cleanest part first, the DNA results. The words, 99.999% landed like a hammer. Derek's attorney tried to object, but Erin had the lab certification, the chain of custody, and the signatures to shut it down. Next came the handwriting analysis. Erin held up the old relinquishment document, then the forensic comparison, the red circles showing the inconsistencies. She didn't accuse, she demonstrated. Derek's jaw tightened. When it was his turn, he stood and spoke like a man who believed charm could erase damage. He called me troubled. He said I was ungrateful. He claimed I ran away because I didn't want rules. Then Erin played the clip from the birthday party. Not the whole thing, just the moment his hand struck my face and the backyard went silent. You could hear my sister's laugh in the background before she realized people were watching. Derek's face drained of color. Erin followed with the messages on my phone, the ones that swung from "come home now" to "I can make this very hard for you." She read them without emotion, and somehow that made them worse. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and asked Derek a simple question about the financial documents. Derek tried to deny everything, but Erin had the subsidy forms, the tax filings, and a witness statement from a former caseworker who had agreed to testify about the payment that moved the paperwork along. Derek's voice rose, his control slipping. He pointed at me and shouted the wrong name, the one he used to keep me small. Maddie. The judge cut him off sharply and warned him to speak respectfully. For the first time in my life, Derek looked afraid. Erin didn't smile. She just opened her binder to the final tab and said, "Your Honor, we are asking this court to recognize that this adoption was obtained through fraud and that the financial benefits were collected under false pretenses." And then she turned to me and nodded once. It was my turn to speak. When I stood up, my knees threatened to shake. But I kept my hands flat on the rail in front of me and looked at the judge, not at Derek. Erin had told me to tell the truth like I was reading a receipt. Simple, clear, no begging, no proving I deserved basic respect. So I spoke about the basement room with no window, about being 11 years old and scrubbing floors while my sister went to sleepovers, about hiding tip money in my shoe because asking for lunch money started fights. I talked about the slap, not as drama, but as a pattern. Derek didn't bother to hide anymore because he thought I had nowhere else to go. Then I said the sentence that felt like cutting a rope. My name is Avery Collins, and I am done answering to the name he used to control me. The courtroom went quiet in a way that felt different from that backyard. This silence had weight. The judge asked Derek a few questions, and Derek tried to talk his way out like he always did, but the evidence didn't care about his charm. In the weeks that followed, the court's decisions came down piece by piece, each one closing a door Derek used to slam in my face. The fraudulent paperwork was referred for criminal review. Restitution was ordered for the benefits collected under false pretenses, and liens were placed that forced his finances into the open. His property business, the one he used as proof that he was a respected man, started collapsing under audits and legal costs. The church board asked him to step down. Sponsors and clients disappeared. The same people who smiled at his parties stopped answering his calls. My sister's live video didn't disappear like she hoped. It got copied, reposted, and stitched into 100 reactions. And for the first time, the humiliation wasn't mine, it was theirs. I didn't celebrate like it was revenge. I felt relief. And then I felt something even stranger. Space. Space in my chest where fear used to live. Cassidy left town and got a job that didn't come with applause. Janine tried to send a message about forgiveness, but I didn't reply. I wasn't angry all the time anymore. I was learning boundaries, and boundaries don't require arguing. They require decisions. I moved into a small studio in Capitol Hill with a real window that let morning light touch the walls. The first week I kept forgetting I was allowed to open the curtains. Caleb helped me replace what I never had: a state ID, a social security card, a bank account in my own name. I started GED classes at night, and during the day I took an intro course in graphic design because I wanted a future that belonged to me, not one I earned for someone else. On Sundays, Caleb cooked dinner at the house that used to belong to my mother. There was a red door and a porch swing that creaked softly when the wind hit it. Sometimes we talked about her. Sometimes we didn't. He never forced memories on me. He just made room for me, the way a parent is supposed to. The lesson I took from all of this isn't that blood automatically makes a family, because it doesn't. And paperwork doesn't either. Family is the person who waits 19 years and still shows up, not to own you, but to give you a choice. It's the person who calls you by your real name, even when no one else ever bothered. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden by the people who were supposed to protect you, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not a payment. You are not an inconvenience. You are not the role they assigned you. You deserve safety, respect, and a life that feels like yours. And if this story hit you, tell me in the comments the name you want to be known by, and one boundary you're finally ready to set. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't payback. It's becoming someone they can't control anymore. Thank you for listening. Honestly, what hit me the hardest wasn't just the slap at that birthday party, it was the way they tried to rewrite Avery's reality for years. Like her pain didn't matter as long as their image stayed perfect. And to me, the real revenge wasn't screaming or payback, it was the truth showing up with receipts, boundaries, and the courage to walk away. Avery getting her real name back felt like the most powerful ending possible. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in her place the moment you found out the truth? And what's one boundary you wish you had set earlier with someone who didn't respect you? Drop your thoughts in the comments.